I'm catching up on some movies that I didn't review from 2020, and today we are going back to the 90s. It's Sonic the Hedgehog and Bad Boys for Life. Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Dan Murrell, and I'm catching up on some movies that I didn't get a chance to review earlier this year when they came out in theaters, and I'm taking on the top 2 movies at the box office for 2020, a box office that is frozen in carbonite until probably July. Sonic the Hedgehog and Bad Boys for Life. First up, let's look at Sonic the Hedgehog, the long-awaited movie adaptation of the popular Sega character that started in the 1990s. I spent many hours trying to get Sonic to run through rings and swim through things and all kinds of Sonic stuff. Now, video game movies, I don't think it needs to be said, have, I wouldn't even say a spotty track record. I'd say a pretty bad track record, both at the box office and quality-wise. And of course, there was the big controversy with Sonic the Hedgehog himself, the design of the character. The whole thing was scrapped and redone at the last minute. It delayed the release of the film, ultimately into a window that I think none of the filmmakers would have known what was coming. But I do think that change was for the better. And when all of this controversy first erupted, I was very openly sort of ambivalent / against this whole redesign thing. The Turtles weren't redesigned. That movie did okay. But I have to say, having seen the movie now, the abomination that existed in the trailers that we first saw really would have probably hurt my enjoyment of the movie. The redesign was for the better. So you know what? I'm going to backtrack and say I was wrong on the fact that they didn't need to redesign the character. I think that it was a good move, and it probably did contribute to the box office success that Sonic found. Of course, Sonic himself is the star of the show, and he's a good character. He's a fun character. Kids like him. I didn't find him too sort of aimed at kids that adults couldn't enjoy the film. As a matter of fact, I found that about the movie itself. Obviously, it is aimed at kids, but there are some funny lines that got me laughing, that kept me engaged in the story.
I just thought you might like a latte with steamed Austrian goat milk.
Of course I want a latte. I love the way you make them!
Yes, there are a couple things that I didn't like. For example, the same thing happened in Pokemon Detective Pikachu. I don't know why we have to play this beat that Sonic or Pikachu or what other video game character is the lead of the film might be dead, because we all know that they're not dead. However, I get it. You're trying to up the dramatic stakes, and particularly when you're aiming at a younger audience, that's a pretty dramatic thing, killing your main character. So I understand why they have to do it. I just don't like that they do it in seemingly a lot of these movies. But overall, it was a fun road movie. I mean, was it the best movie of the year or one of the best movies of the year? Well, technically by default, yes. But assuming that more movies come out this year, I don't know if Sonic the Hedgehog is going to be in my top 10. Having said that, the bar is so low for video game movies that it wouldn't have taken much for this movie to clear it. I think it clears it, and it clears it pretty easily. I enjoyed this movie. I would recommend that you see it. You can watch it on demand. I think it's out on Blu-ray and physical media. If not now, then pretty soon. Because it's not just the Sonic show. You have James Marsden, who... actually, in my mind, he's playing Mark Wahlberg in this movie. Not in an annoying way. I just thought it was very interesting. I don't know if it was conscious, but as I'm watching this entire thing unfold, I'm thinking, Mark Wahlberg could have played this part, and I wonder if James Marsden knows that.
They're coming for me!
Who's coming for you? What's that got to do with me?
I don't have time to explain, but you have to help me.
No, I don't.
It's very much the kind of action role that Mark Wahlberg has found himself in the Transformers and in this second or third stage of his career, because I count the music as the first stage of Mark Wahlberg's career. In addition, you have Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik. I'm a Jim Carrey fan. He's a complicated guy. He's taken a lot of career twists and turns that you might not have seen coming, but this movie showed once again that he's got those comedic chops. He is, of course, going way overboard and playing this thing very cartoonish, but it fits the movie.
Are you in charge here?
Yes, I
Nope.
am.
Wrong. I'm in charge.
Is
Me.
Major
Ben charge.
And it took me back to the early days of his career when he largely understood when to be cartoonish, when to pull it back a little bit. He built his whole persona on that, playing these larger-than-life roles, even in movies like Liar Liar that aren't Batman movies or Ace Ventura. That's a very broad performance, but he was actually also able to modulate that performance so that you liked him in that movie and it didn't seem out of place. I felt the same with Dr. Robotnik. He had me laughing in several spots. By the way, this makes him the only person in the history of ever to actually own a functioning Power Glove. Because let me tell you, I had one when I was a kid, and that thing did not work. You lied to me, Lucas from The Wizard, and I will never forgive you for that. Of course, you have to credit a lot of the film's success to the director of the film, Jeff Fowler, as well as the writers, Pat Casey and Josh Miller. And I think a common thread that you see when you look at them is that they were not overloaded with projects. This isn't a case where you have a director and or a writing team that's working on 17 other projects at the same time. In the case of Jeff Fowler, you have a director who is an animation veteran. He was actually nominated for an Oscar for animated short film with Tim Miller, the director of Deadpool. You also have in Pat Casey and Josh Miller, the writers, as I mentioned, writers that are not overburdened with working on 15 projects at once. You can tell that they took their time with this script. They didn't just rush it out because it's a piece of IP that doesn't have a movie yet. Everyone involved, it feels like, was devoted to making the best Sonic the Hedgehog movie they could make. And I know that that seems like pretty easy movie logic, but how many movies have we seen that are based around these characters or franchises that seem like they're done out of obligation, with an overtaxed writing team that just wants to hit the minimum amount of story points and a director that just wants to make the fastest, quickest movie, most generic and bland looking movie that they can just to get this thing into theaters and make some money. Ultimately, Sonic the Hedgehog feels like a movie that's made for Sonic fans, that's made for kids, but that also translates to adults. So I would give Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie, much like Sonic used to give me every time I booted my Sega up, the thumbs up. And that also means that Sonic the Hedgehog is the latest inductee into the Video Game Movies of Acceptable Quality Hall of Fame. Congratulations, Sonic, you're in some okay company. Next up is the third film in the Bad Boys franchise, Bad Boys for Life, which seems like it should be the fourth film in the Bad Boys franchise with the 4 as the 4, but hey, I'm not here to nitpick. Fast and the Furious has thrown all naming and numbering conventions out the window. It's the wild, wild west at this point. This film comes not from Michael Bay, who directed the first 2 installments, but from co-directors Adil and Bilal, who I think really breathe some fresh energy into this franchise. The thing I like most about this movie is it doesn't try to ignore the fact that it's been so long, 20 years really, since we've seen these characters on screen, and it doesn't try to gloss over the fact that they're getting older. We've seen in a lot of action franchises or these franchises that are revisited after decades between sequels, the fact that they either kind of jokingly talk about the fact that they're getting older, like the Die Hard franchise, or they just ignore it and try to recreate the magic, but with visibly older characters. I like that this movie is about these 2 detectives and these 2 friends who are getting older. It doesn't skirt the issue. It addresses aging, and not in an I'm too old for this shit kind of way, the stuff that you see in Lethal Weapon and a lot of other pretender action movies. But the fact that the movie is directly about revisiting your past, about retirement, about letting go, about learning what it is to mature. There were a lot more themes than I expected in this movie that were resonant to these characters and that hit home. And may I just say, Martin Lawrence brought it in this movie.
How dare you, man? I sat by your bedside. I wiped the drool off your chin, Mike. Don't disrespect me like that, because you don't know.
A lot has been written about Martin Lawrence and the fact that the first Bad Boys movies were sort of him at the peak of his success, and he has lived a lot of life between them. And I've read a lot of articles about what he's gone through since these movies came out: career highs, career lows, personal highs, personal lows, and you can feel him bring that personal history to his character in this film. He was really the surprise and the revelation for me of this movie, in that this was maybe the best performance I've ever seen him do in any movie. And this and The Beach Bum, I hope that this means that he is going to come back in a real way to have a great second act as an actor, because he was fantastic in this movie, oftentimes transcending the writing, which wasn't bad, but bringing so much emotion and depth to the franchise. And you can feel that with Will Smith as well. You can feel the emotional connection that they have to these movies, because this came at a critical point in both of their careers. As I mentioned, Martin Lawrence riding high, really for Will Smith, his first taste of blockbuster success and fame before he would go on to so much more in the late 90s going into the 2000s and up to today. So both actors really brought it and brought a lived-in quality to their characters. The writing, I think, was strong in that it didn't try to ignore the fact that they were older. It played into those themes. The supporting cast was good. Always good to see Joe Pantoliano back as the police captain. And can I just say hallelujah to the fact that Adil and Bilal, as I mentioned, bringing new energy into the franchise. Part of that new energy is that you could see the action. Not only could you see the action, you understood the geography of the action sequence and what was going on, where people were going, the different geography of the space. This seems like small stuff, but there's so many action movies, and Michael Bay, yes, is one of the biggest offenders, where things are chopped and cut so quickly. You don't know where anybody is, what's going on. You just see flashes and cuts of gun barrels and blood and people and bodies moving. You have no concept of the flow of an action sequence, whether it's a gunfight or a motorcycle chase or really anything in this movie. I always felt like I knew where the characters were. It looked great. It flowed well. They set up things, set pieces in a very interesting and dynamic way. There's one particularly that's set in an auto body shop or garage that you see the characters interact with the environment. You know where everyone is. You know who's hiding where. And as everyone tries to kind of sneak around, it's refreshing to see that in a world where so many action blockbusters are cut to bits that it just becomes mindless. I never got that feel with this movie. And I also want to give a shout out to the director of photography, Robrecht Havert, who made this look so lush and gorgeous and really makes Miami look its best. And as I looked up the credits for Robrecht Havert, I found out that he also was the cinematographer on a great French movie from 2017 called Revenge. If you like grimy, gritty, and I do mean grimy and gritty, revenge thrillers, check out that movie. If you have Shudder, it's streaming on Shudder right now. But when I saw that he was also the cinematographer on that film, it all clicked in why this movie looked so good. So good action, good acting, it looks great. The script is good. There wasn't a whole lot I had to really criticize about this film. It does take a turn in the third act that does feel very soap opera-y. You may see it coming. You may not see it coming. So that drags it down a little bit as you get into the finale and conclusion of the film. But again, so many times plot points are dependent on the actors to execute them as much as they are dependent on the writing to write them realistically. So where the writing may have failed, I feel like the acting itself elevated that writing to a point where it doesn't seem as ridiculous or it doesn't torpedo the movie as much as it certainly could have. So Bad Boys for Life, a sequel that I enjoyed, arguably better than the two movies that preceded it, which means Bad Boys for Life, you join the Michael Bay franchise sequel that's arguably better than the films that preceded it, Hall of Fame. I'm still holding out for a Pearl Harbor 2 that's better than the original. It wouldn't take much. So those are my thoughts on Sonic the Hedgehog and Bad Boys for Life. As I catch up on more movies that I missed in 2020, I'll be sure to bring you my thoughts right here on the channel. We've already got so much fun stuff going on. My first episode of Charts with Dan, the box office show, debuted earlier this week. And later this week, I have a show that's premiering on Why I Love, one of my favorite movies. It's a format that I'm really excited about and that I hope I get to keep doing for a long time to come, because I love sharing why I love the movies I love with all of you guys and then hearing why you love them too. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. That's the YouTube motto. It really does help. The response to the channel so far has been really overwhelming. And if you want to jump into even more fun stuff, you can check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/Dan Murrell. We'll be launching the first Dan's Monthly Movie Club later this week. I'll also be recording a commentary track for Jurassic Park, which is going to go out to folks over on Patreon. If you want to know even more about that, check out that page, patreon.com/Dan Murrell. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to bringing you my thoughts on so many more movies. And until next time, I'll see you.